Welcome back to the MLB Rundown. I'm your host, Josh Shepardson, or BChat50 if you're on Twitter. And I'm joined, as always, by CBSSports.com's RJ White, who you can also follow on Twitter at RJWhite1. How's the season starting off for you in fantasy leagues?
It's going all right. I'm doing way better in head-to-head than I am in roto. I need to do some work on my roto teams, but my head-to-heads are looking good. Happy Chris Bryant Day, by the way. I'm excited. It's finally here.
I'm excited as well. I mean, I saw J.J. Cooper from Baseball America tweet this earlier, and it's so true. It wasn't that long ago that when the top prospect in the minors reached the big leagues, it just wasn't a celebrated thing, but it's so good to see that now. I mean, it's awesome that Major League Baseball Network is covering prospects more closely, that baseball fans are getting more excited about these guys getting promoted because, I mean, they're really the future of the game, and I'm excited. I can't wait to watch Bryant this afternoon. We're recording now. I've had as we're recording, the Tigers and White Sox are playing. It's nice to have some afternoon baseball on a Friday, and I just can't wait to watch Bryant this afternoon.
Yeah, me too. He's going to be something pretty special. It's good to see that he's finally up.
Yeah, I agree. Glad to hear that you're doing fairly well in your leagues. My team in my keeper league with friends that I've been in for over a decade, it's been bit by the injury bug. I own Anthony Rendon, Carlos Gomez, Michael Brantley, and this is a keeper league. So if people are kind of wondering, like, how did I accumulate this talent? Well, there's your answer. But Alex Rios, I drafted Koji Uehara and Sean Doolittle. Thankfully, I have Uehara back, but my DL is jam-packed. We use three guys there, so I'm looking to scrape the wire. I've been picking up some players and dipping into the free agent pool, and that segues nicely into our topic today, which is your topic, Riding the Wave. It's your weekly column, and why don't you tell me two of your favorite players that you highlighted in that as popular ads?
Well, I've also been dealing with injuries in my Dynasty League. I think I've said it here before. I had a ton of pitcher injuries. In that league, I picked up Brandon Morrow. He's delivered 2 strong starts now. His fastball velocity looks fine. Even though he seems to be relying on the four-seamer less and less, he's mixing up his pitches a lot. And it's to the point where it seems like it's by design, not that he's having trouble with his fastball, because like I said, the velocity's fine. So I like the way he's mixing pitches. The problem with Morrow is always health. We know he'll have a shelf life dependent on him staying healthy, but I'm hoping he can do just that, at least until Alex Cobb returns, who's one of my guys that's sitting on my bench now because I don't have any room to put him on the DL because I got so many other Dynasty guys on the DL at this point. So I like Morrow. I think he plays well in that park, and I can understand why everybody's adding him because I added him myself.
I'm right there with you. After his first start, the very first thing I did the following day was hop on Brooks Baseball, see where the fastball velocity was, and it was cooking and was sharp in his second start. Got off to a rough start, but really settled in. As somebody who used him on a lot of daily teams, I was following that start fairly closely. Racked up the pitch count through 2 innings, but absolutely settled in and cruised and made it through 7 innings. So I was impressed. I'm impressed with what I've seen so far. Like the pitch FX data, like the pedigree, like the ballpark. I mean, it's hard not to like pitchers pitching at Petco. For goodness sakes, it made Eric Stoltz streamable at times in the past, and we know Morrow certainly got more talent than him. So I really like the Brandon Morrow towel. I'm right there with you. He got scooped on me a little earlier than I expected. Actually, I believe he was scooped in advance of his first start in case it was a good one. So hat tip to the owner in my league that did that. But if you grabbed Morrow, I don't think it's time to cash out. Understand that he does have an injury shelf life like RJ mentioned. If somebody wants to overpay for him, we're certainly never going to tell you not to take an overpay. But I don't think that this is a situation where 2 good starts, you have to be racing out there to try and peddle him for 65 cents on the dollar or anything like that.
Right. Another popular ad I love, but I didn't write about in Riding the Wave because I was saving him for today's column, Chasing Saves, is Adam Ottavino. He's had trouble against lefties in his career, which I think gave a lot of people pause, and they were looking to guys like maybe Betancourt or other people getting saves in that bullpen. But he's worked on his approach against lefties. He's added an interesting cutter to his arsenal while getting rid of the mediocre changeup. You add that upgrade to an increased fastball velocity, which started last year around 93 miles an hour before finishing up around 97 by the end of the year, and is back around 97 in the early going this year. And the results have been impressive. He's had 12 strikeouts and 1 walk in just 6 1/3 scoreless innings while giving up only 1 hit. I think he could actually be a top 10 fantasy closer over the remainder of the season. I think he has to be owned in all leagues at this point.
Yeah, that's a good tout. And I'm not an expert. Is increasing velocity to the upper 90s, is that a good thing, RJ? Because it seems like it would be a good thing.
I'd say it's pretty good for guys like Aroldis Chapman, you know, and guys like that. They tend to make it work for them.
Yeah, I like the pitch FX data there. I like the fact that he changed his repertoire. Nothing gets me more excited than velocity gains as a pitcher in terms of fantasy baseball. And I'm also a sucker for these guys that are willing to scrap pitches that don't work and try and kind of reinvent their secondary pitches, because it's amazing what it can do for some of these guys. So I'm right there with you. You also covered some popular drops in your Riding the Wave. You want to dive into that just a little bit?
Yeah, the one guy that stuck out to me is Brett Cecil. I mean, he wasn't quite ready for the season after throwing just 4 innings in spring training. The team removed him from the closer role so he can continue to build up to midseason form and less of a pressure role. But it's not like he was performing terribly. The next night after being removed, he looked great. He had his fastball velocity back. He had his curveball working. The rookie Miguel Castro is fine in the closer role. He hasn't done anything to lose it, but I see the demotion of Cecil as a temporary thing. I'd expect him to regain the job sometime soon once he's had that preparation window taken up and he's ready to go. Even despite getting removed from the 9th inning, he's yet to allow a run. He's given up just 1 hit and 2 walks in 2 2/3 innings while racking up 5 strikeouts. Those are pretty good numbers for a guy that's still trying to work on his craft and get ready for the season. So I think he's back racking up saves. I know why people have dropped him. Obviously, if the guy's not closing, you think he doesn't have a spot on your team, but I don't see that as a permanent thing. I think he's closing by the end of May, the end of April, certainly. So I'd add him if he got dropped in your league.
I agree with that assessment. You mentioned a few walks, and that's probably the biggest knock on Cecil, but he's a pitcher who induces a lot of ground balls and can miss a lot of bats. So guys like that in the 9th inning tend to have a way of working around their walk issues or subpar control. And I think Cecil's just another example of that. Big bat misser. And as you said, a lot of people may have cast him aside because he wasn't racking up saves. Unless you're in an extremely shallow league where there's just closers floating around on the wire throughout the year, I think he's an absolute must grab. Out of curiosity, if you had the choice between Cecil and Ottavino, who are you grabbing?
I like Ottavino. I like his stuff better. Okay. I think he's locked in at this point. The comments from Walt Weiss make it seem like he's not auditioning for the role anymore. It makes it sound like it's his and they expect big things out of him. So I like Ottavino.
Sounds good to me, and I'm in agreement there as well. So any other names you want to highlight from your popular drop section?
Yeah, well, there was one guy I didn't write about, but he was a very popular drop over the last couple of weeks because he didn't have a job coming into the season, and that's Danny Salazar. He's coming back for a spot start Saturday. He was sent to AAA to open the year, obviously. I'm fairly confident the majority of his starts he makes this season are going to be in the majors. That seemed like a very temporary thing. That makes him a great guy to have on the bench right now, especially before he makes a start Saturday, because if he does mow down the competition Saturday, you know everybody's going to run out and try to grab him, and then you're just one of 12 guys in your league trying to get him on your team. So if you can get him now preemptively, he has a good start. Maybe he sticks in the rotation. I think that a guy like Zach McAllister might not have a long shelf life in the rotation. When he's filling in, TJ House might not be there long term. So Salazar, I think, is going to get one of those rotation spots eventually. If you could stick him on the bench now, I think that's a good deal.
I'm in total agreement. Both of us were very high on Danny Salazar coming into the season. Both of us remain very high on Danny Salazar. And I'll add that I don't think it's out of the question that if he is brilliant on Sunday, that maybe Zach McAllister ends up back in the bullpen a little sooner than some people expect. He did get rocked in his first start, was fairly good in relief of Carlos Carrasco after Carrasco was unfortunately hit by a comebacker. But we've said it before, Salazar's ceiling exceeds that of both House and McAllister. And ultimately, on a team that has aspirations of contending for the World Series, you have to think that their perfect world rotation is going to feature Danny Salazar in it. And the better he pitches on Saturday, the more difficult it's going to be to justify keeping him in the minors to further hone his craft. And he does already have one very good minor league start under his belt. So if you can get out and get him, go for it. I, unfortunately, spending most of my day at a computer covering fantasy baseball yesterday, happened to leave just when the news was announced that he'd be getting a spot start, and I got swooped by a league mate on him, and I was left shaking my fist. So there's a little bit of bitterness harbored by me, but I am looking forward to watching Danny Salazar pitch tomorrow.
And it's worth pointing out that spot start's coming against Minnesota. I mean, you're not going to get much better matchups than that. So the Cards are certainly in line for him to have a good start. Yeah, I actually picked him up before that news broke because you knew it was coming. I mean, he's not going to make 20 starts in the minors. So if you have that bench spot, which I happen to have in a few leagues, and I saw he was still on the wire in most of them, I picked him up earlier this week, and it just worked out well. So now's the time to grab him if you haven't yet.
Definitely. Any other ad recommendations you've got for some under-owned players?
I still like Bud Norris. He had a bad spring. He had a bad debut, but he looked much better Wednesday against the Yankees. He had an excellent slider last year, and once that rounds into form, and he's kind of more in mid-season form than he is in the early portions of the season, I think he could be on his way to a breakout year. I certainly wouldn't drop anyone of quality to add him. I like Salazar more than him long-term, I think I like Brandon Morrow maybe a little bit more than him, but if you're looking to add a player from the player pool, you're dealing with injuries, trying to replace an injured pitcher, I think you could certainly do worse than gambling on his upside. I think he's a great deep league guy to have.
I agree. The most important thing I would caution with Norris is be careful if he's facing a lefty-heavy lineup. Just one that comes to mind is the Indians if he has a showdown with Cleveland. Probably not the best matchup based on his pitch mix and his platoon split. He does struggle a little bit with lefties, but in a standard balanced offense that's not super lefty heavy, or one that features maybe some reserves that are pushed into action just to get the extra lefties in the lineup, I don't mind Norris against left-handed batters. I do mind him a little bit when I'm stuck trotting him out against a lineup that's got a lot of left-handed talent, but otherwise, Norris does have the strikeout rate that you're looking for, can do a good job of pounding the strike zone when things are clicking, and I'm in complete agreement. When that slider is working, it is a wipeout pitch that can really miss some bats.
Yeah, I like him. Like I said, deep league only though. I still have him in the bench on the dynasty league because I had so many injuries. Hay was a sleeper of mine going into the league. That's the only place I have him right now. I wouldn't hesitate dropping him if one of these nice guys came up.
Definitely. I'll give a couple deep league options, and I'd love for you to weigh in on the first. I wrote about Chris Heston of the San Francisco Giants for Rotographs on Friday, and he's off to a hot start. As a Giants fan, I've been familiar with Chris Heston for a while, scanning MILB box scores, and he's a guy who posted some impressive upper minor league numbers in terms of ERA and WHIP. Never a big strikeout guy, but I would constantly check scouting reports at Baseball America and Baseball Prospectus and John Sickles' minor league ball, and this wasn't a guy who was highly thought of, and it was pretty easy to understand why. Doesn't throw hard, was typically an upper 80s, maybe low 90s fastball guy, no overwhelming secondary pitches, and he was actually DFA'd in July of 2013, so I mean that kind of goes to show what the organization thought of him. They weren't afraid to expose him to the other 29 Major League Baseball clubs, and yet he's off to a hot start. And a couple things I was keeping tabs on. I had read that he'd put on some weight in the offseason. Usually best shape of your life type of info in the spring is something that I don't put a lot of stock in. But it did give me reason to check out his Brooks player card, and it was a bit perplexing. In his first start of the season, his sinker was operating at basically the fastest speeds that I've seen from him, about 92 miles an hour. Lined up nicely with the PitchFX data grabbed in the spring by Brooks. And this is despite what Brooks has as a cold gun at Chase Field so far this season. But oddly enough, has as a cold gun. But his velocity was actually down on his sinker, closer to the low 90s as I'm accustomed to seeing, like just over 90 miles an hour at AT&T, which oddly enough, they have as having I'm keeping PitchFX data because I'm not sure what to make of it. It is early, and I'm sure that there's some sample size issues there. I know the page for Brooks that comments on the hot and cold guns does mention that it does take some time for that stuff to normalize. But what Heston does well, and on the upper minors, is pound the strike balls at a high rate. To me, that makes for an interesting profile pitching at AT&T Park, especially if you can keep up the velocity. If you can keep a strikeout rate above 18%, which is where it is right now, that makes for a nice guy to round out deep league head-to-head rotations or deep league rotations where you have a loose innings pitched cap in roto leagues. If that's a restrictive innings pitched cap, you're probably shouldn't be racing out to grab Heston unless you've got a loaded bullpen that can pick up the slack and strikeouts. What are you seeing with Heston?
Yeah, I think the key thing with him is he looks like he stopped trying to do too much on the mound. He had very limited action in the majors last year, but it seemed like he wanted to try a bunch of different pitches. He ended up issuing a lot of walks. I think right now he's relying sinker curveball, and that's his strength, especially. I think that curveball. I know he's mostly the sinker ball pitcher, but I think that curveball could be a pretty good weapon for him. I think he's not going to be a long-term option in fantasy leagues. He's no more than a matchup play to me over his next few starts. I don't think he has a spot in that rotation long-term because it's pretty stacked. So once everybody's healthy, I think it's either back to the bullpen or back to the minors for him.
Yeah, it's really going to depend on Matt Cain's health, which at this point it looks like he's throwing here pretty soon. Once Cain's back, that rotation's full. But for now, I agree with the spot start. Use him at home at AT&T. And maybe he sticks if there's another injury in the rotation, but definitely more of a short-term than long-term grab. Guy who I think could have some more long-term success is kind of like the highly touted American League version of Heston, and that's Kyle Gibson. Gibson, harder, other sinker guy. Changeup, doesn't really throw a curve. But I looked at him in depth coming into the season, and I was higher on him than most experts because looking at his pitch-by-pitch breakdown, this is a guy that can induce ground balls with using all of his pitches. And really the biggest knock on Gibson is he just has not missed left-handed bats. If he can take even a step there, we'll be talking about a guy who has a Dallas Keuchel-like breakout, and that I think is basically your perfect role projection. He had a good second start against a hot Royals lineup after a clunker against the Tigers, but got to give him a pass against the Tigers. A lot of pitchers are going to have bad days against them, so I'm not ready to write his season off after a bad opening start, and his follow-up was certainly what I was hoping for. I think he's definitely got AL-only league appeal and deep mixed league appeal, and I think if everything clicks, he could have some back-of-the-rotation standard mixed league appeal as well.
Yeah, I'm not too terribly high on him. I think he needs to get that fastball velocity up to have more success. And though he mixes his pitches well, I don't think he really has any elite pitches in the bag. And I think you need that to turn to if you need a key strikeout. I mean, it's going to happen. You're going to get guys on base. You're going to get guys on base in scoring position, and you need to get the next guy out. And I think smoke and mirrors is only going to help you so much. I think you need to have that pitch that you can lean on. Since I just don't think the strikeouts are coming at all, I'm not too interested in them in fantasy leagues. But I play in a lot of head-to-head points leagues at this point, so you need to get those strikeouts to rack up those points. And because I don't think he's a big strikeout pitcher, and he's not going to become a big strikeout pitcher, I'm not really looking at him in daily leagues earlier. I mean, it would have to be a great matchup for me to consider him in daily leagues because he's just not going to get those points without strikeouts. And the best matchup he could possibly have would be the Twins, and that's not going to happen. So I'm avoiding him, I think, in most leagues.
Yeah, and that's a key point. Really, it is league dependent. And if you're in a points league where strikeouts are of the utmost importance, then it really is tough to rely on him. And I mean, it's not just Gibson; it's other pitchers who fail to miss bats as well. So that's going to wrap it up for our free agent talk. Let's move on to the close of the show and my favorite portion, and that's the forum questions. Let's start off with the first question from user Garrett Eric. The league's a 10-team head-to-head CBS league. And the owner has Anthony Rizzo riding the pine behind Jose Abreu and Edwin Encarnacion. Nice problem to have, I'll start by saying. But he's already had offers of Rizzo out there for King Felix, Matt Harvey, Zach Greinke, and Adam Wainwright, which neither of us would have advocated making that offer in the first place. But those were all rejected. Thank the owner for rejecting the Waino deal. But with that in mind and his desperate need for pitching, would you deal Rizzo and A.J. Burnett for Madison Bumgarner and Francisco Liriano?
Yeah, I think I take Bumgarner and Liriano if that's the best offer I could find. if I don't know that we've completely explored all avenues at this point, because there's nothing saying you have to trade Rizzo of the three. If you can get more for Abreu and you could get an ace for a higher up ace, if you can get Felix, in that area, or you can get a more favorable trade, I think go ahead and do that, because the drop off from Abreu to Rizzo isn't that great. So I think the other owner that's making this Bumgarner offer is making out pretty well in this deal. I really like that team adding Rizzo. But if you've already explored all avenues and you can't trade any of the other guys for a better package, and this is the best you think you're going to get, I take it, because Rizzo certainly isn't doing anything to help Garrett's team on the bench.
Yeah, I'm going to echo your sentiments. I mean, if you've kicked the tires on other options, such as dealing Abreu or Encarnacion for a higher-end starter, and this is the best you can do, I'm a big Bumgarner fan, and Liriano has strikeout upside. Another option apparently is that Michael Wacha was offered for Mookie Betts. Now, Garrett Eric has both Jacoby Ellsbury and Starling Marte riding the pine for him. Is that a deal that you'd be more inclined to make than the Rizzo deal, or would you prefer the Rizzo deal if the other avenues have been explored by offering Abreu and Encarnacion?
Yeah, I think I take the Bumgarner thing over Wacha. Nothing wrong with Wacha. I just Betts could be something special too. I might try to trade Marte. I love Marte. I think he's a breakout candidate, but he hasn't done too much lately. So if you could trade him for a mid-level pitcher, I might explore that more. But I take the Bumgarner deal of the two.
So would I. I mean, if you're going to look to upgrade pitching at this point, I think dealing for a guy who can be an SP1 is certainly the move to make. And dealing Starling Marte, if you can get another pitcher to kind of supplement the rest of your group, I think that'll help you greatly. And neither Ellsbury or Marte are doing a heck of a lot on your bench. I do like keeping Ellsbury there because he does have a very well-rounded skill set, and hitting leadoff for the Yankees is going to yield some run production. So that's going to do it for that question. Next up, we got a submission from Dylan Lockwood. In a 10-team head-to-head league, would you drop Marcell Ozuna for Chris Carter? I would make the swap.
Yeah, I'd take Carter over Ozuna. I had Carter ranked higher in the preseason, and while he's done a lot to try to shake my faith in him at this point, I'm not going to severely alter those rankings after a week and a half. His strikeout rate's high so far, even for him. I think it's like at 40%. So if he would end up going in your starting lineup, I would try to hold off for a few days, if at all possible, until he shows some signs of at least turning the corner. But if we're talking about a bench spot in a 10-teamer, I'd go ahead and make the move now and just let him work it out on the bench.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed Carter on last week's podcast, and as you pointed out, if this cold streak from Chris Carter happened in June, it would be a non-factor, basically. It would be what's expected from a 3 true outcomes hitter like Carter. But because it's at the beginning of the season, everything's amplified. Everybody wants to tinker and get things right. I'm also still enamored with his huge power potential. And his ballpark's more conducive for power than Ozuna. So I would make that swap. But like you said, if you can wait a couple days before doing that, maybe give Carter a little bit of time to get out of this funk and then make that swap, I like that suggestion. The last question is submitted by Secret Agent Man, and we got another 10-team league. This one's a 5x5 Roto League. Would you rather own Chris Heston or Brandon McCarthy? Despite my touting Heston earlier in the podcast, this is an easy one for me. I think you have to take McCarthy, right?
Yeah, I go McCarthy. He has the higher long-term upside. I don't think Heston makes more than a handful of starts, like I said earlier. McCarthy's had success at the big league level. He's locked into a rotation spot. The only reason he has a terrible ERA right now is because of his awful home run luck. He's given up home runs on 50% of his fly balls. That is insane. His ground ball to fly ball ratio will revert to last year's numbers at some point. Right now, they're a little out of skew. Considering he has added fastball velocity as well, he could actually have a breakout season. I think these first two starts are going to be long in the rearview mirror by the time the season's over. I'm buying on him. I'm actually, once we get off the podcast, I'm going to go and try to throw a few trade offers out and try to get him in some leagues.
I definitely agree with you. I mean, this is a rare instance where you're comparing two pitchers where McCarthy has both a higher ceiling and a higher floor. He is locked into that rotation. He was brilliant last year with the Yankees in the second half, and I don't see any reason not to expect him to turn it around and enjoy a career year here in Los Angeles. If somebody wants to wager that Brandon McCarthy is going to continue to allow a home run on 50% of the fly balls that are put in play against him, I would be more than happy to take that wager, take their money. You can find me on Twitter at bchat50. But as RJ pointed out, that's an absurd rate, and that is, and when it does, you're going to want to be the owner of Brandon McCarthy. So if anything, this has opened up a nice little buying window for him, perhaps. And RJ, kick the tire and maybe acquiring him, maybe get him in as kind of a throw-in a deal, go a little bit bigger deal, and try and make it seem like he's just kind of an afterthought. And if you can do that in your fantasy leagues, that's a good get as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, the only thing I would double check just to make sure, I would make sure that he's not facing Chris Bryant in every one of his starts, because at that point he might give up 50% of his of home runs on all of his fly balls, because you don't want to face Chris Bryant every time you go to the mound.
No, you do not. And that's going to do it for MLB Rundown. I hope you enjoyed the show, and tune in next week. Make sure that you're getting on fantasybaseballcafe.com to check out the wonderful content we have up there, hopping on the forums and asking questions. And who knows, maybe next week it'll be your question that we answer. Take care and good luck.